Hi, I'm Gilly Bond, a specialist pelvic health physio, and I'm answering your questions about bladder pain syndrome. So the first thing to do is go back and watch the video about trigger points, which should be on the playlist somewhere, because we don't call them trigger points and they're not trigger points anymore. I want you to think about just areas of tension or soreness within the muscle. It's really important you understand that first before we go on. When we think about our pelvic floor, you've identified you might have bladder pain syndrome or another pelvic pain state. Something's hurting downstairs. You might have chronic prostatitis, testicular pain, anything. We know that the pelvic floor can hold loads of knots, like anywhere else in the body. The thing is, those knots will be sore when you touch them and when someone presses on them. And actually, a lot of the time, that tension and that pressure and some of those knots, when we touch them inside, may recreate your pain. And if we get rid of those knots and those feelings and reduce it so your pelvic floor feels better, your general pain, whatever you've been suffering with, will be a lot better. This is a mainstay of our treatment. But what we're doing isn't getting rid of the knots, okay? When we work with your pelvic floor and we massage it, which should involve you activating and relaxing your pelvic floor repeatedly with someone applying a bit of pressure, it shouldn't hurt. Physio should never hurt. So if anyone's hurting you, get them to stop and get them to do it sub-threat. Get them to watch some of my videos on sub-threat treatment. But when we're doing that, we are massaging. What we're doing is achieving movement in the muscle to begin with. So we know that a muscle with lots of knots in it, and if you've been diagnosed with trigger points, doesn't move very well. So if this is the front of the pelvis, the pelvic floor should go from all the way down here, lifting all the way up and forward and all the way back down, and be able to relax fully when you want it to. A lot of the time when we've got pain states, we're like this, and it's just so tight and it won't relax. So you can have sex or get an erection or have a poo, but it won't compress to be able to compress the urethra to allow you to stop from passing water. So you might be incontinent, you might have other issues with prolapses or other tension. So that bowl-shaped pelvic floor should be able to go through full range of motion and back down. So when we're doing the massage of the pelvic floor to get rid of the trigger points, which aren't trigger points, we don't know what they are, but we're getting there. There is areas that hurt. They exist. The phenomenon exists, but it's not what we think of as a trigger point, as a knot. It's something else. What they're doing is they're getting full movement of your pelvic floor, which is great. That's flushing all the blood through the muscle. It's flushing away any inflammation in the muscle. It's giving a bit of a calming reassurance to the nerves that they don't need to be hypersensitive. And it's desensitizing the whole area. So it's not the fact that they press in certain areas in your pelvic floor which gets rid of your pain, it's that they're just there. Okay, having internal treatment with someone touching your muscle inside does all the local stuff downstairs, but also from a brain point of view, it changes the level at which the brain is firing and saying, whoop, you're under threat. That bit is under threat. You need to know about it, so I'm going to give you some pain. Okay, so by regularly being in the pelvic floor, by regularly treating the pelvic floor, your therapist is getting your brain to feel less threatened in that area. It's a process of desensitization. That's what we understand is happening now. So even if your pelvic floor is not tight, but you're still having some pain, regularly having a massage inside might make things feel better. But hopefully what you take away from this and what I'm trying to say is that knots exist everywhere. If you have a feel in your shoulder right now, you'll find one. If you have a feel in your hand between your thumb and your first finger, you might find one there or on the other side. Whoop, press hard. Yep, that bit hurts. And they're just areas of tension that normally exist, and they're quite okay to exist everywhere. They are not a cause of your pain, because hopefully you found one trigger point, one area of pain, one area of tension myalgia that you didn't know was there. So my thumbs and my hands haven't been hurting all day, but I've got some massive knots in them. So I don't need to relieve them to be out of pain. They can be there and not hurt. And it's the same in the pelvic floor. So when people ask me lots and lots how to get rid of their trigger points, I'm much more interested in just massaging the pelvic floor regularly, because you need to do it around about 5 to 6 weeks, repeatedly, not lots, 5 to 10 minutes every other day with your own thumbs, with a wand, something else. See a physio before you have this done, and before you embark upon it, because there's lots of cases in which it's not so safe, so it's really, really important that you need a proper assessment first, and they can kind of point out where you need to be going. But don't hunt down the knots. You can treat them, but you don't need to hunt them down, and they will come back and they won't hurt you, and they'll sit there, and that's okay. If you're a physio watching this, they're a bit like perineums, so you've got to think of muscular knots as perineum. It's somewhere that force attaches into and bounces, it's there to support, so we can pull against it, and it occurs anywhere there's a change in direction of the force. So in your traps, the force goes up to your neck and then up in your neck, so we're going to have a knot here as it translates the force around the corner. Makes sense. You've got to have some kind of like bar to hang off as we translate force. So it happens normally in the pelvic floor. Your pelvic floor being painful is separate to the amount of knots in it and areas of tension. And by massaging the pelvic floor, yes, we will reduce the tension and the knots, but that isn't our aim. Our aim is just to make it feel a lot better, because we know if your pelvic floor feels better, your pain state, your bladder pain syndrome, your interstitial cystitis, we call it BPS, your chronic prostatitis, your bowel pain, your any pain downstairs is significantly improved when we play with your pelvic floor and we try and help desensitize. So I hope that's helped a little bit. Have a look at the other videos if you haven't so far. Like and subscribe, and more information about bladder pain syndrome will be coming to you soon.